Washington football. Woo! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle. Might be joined by my co-host for this episode. I don't know just yet, but we'll find out here in the near future. But the title of tonight's episode is Pro Day Poppin', and there's a lot of prospects coming down with some great numbers, of course. But to be able to join us for this episode is our good friend of this show, the ultra-talented Mr. Mitch Tischler. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday, sir. How are you doing?
Happy to join you.
Yes, sir.
I don't know that I have a whole lot of numbers here for you pro days, but ready to go.
It's all right. We'll get into that later, but you and I, me being a former offensive lineman, I'm not sure. Do you have a background with offensive line?
I do.
My man. So that's something we both have a fond knowledge for, right? When it comes to Laremy Tunsil and what's going on offensively, what do you think is going to happen with Andrew Wiley? Obviously, he restructured his deal. Where would you be sliding him?
I think it depends on what this team decides they want to do with, with Brandon Coleman. I think that's a big question mark. To me, I wanted to give Brandon Coleman more time to develop. I think that he can develop into a good NFL player, but obviously not at the behest of trading for a guy like Laremy Tunsil. That's a game changer for this offensive line. So if I was the offensive line coach, I'd be throwing Brandon Coleman over to right tackle, and then Wiley is my right guard until Sam Cosmi comes back. And after that, he's kind of a backup swing tackle, Swiss Army knife type guy who can play all along the offensive line. I think the question also is going to be what they do with Nick Allegretti at left guard. Certainly, they brought in some names to battle with him. I don't think that he was quite as bad as some folks are alleging he was, but he certainly wasn't. Didn't play. He wasn't great by any means. So certainly having Laremy Tunsil play next to him, I think will help out a lot in terms of his abilities. But ultimately, Wiley, I think, is your kind of backup swing tackle that Cornelius Lucas role, and then plays a little bit of guard filling in if there's injuries.
I absolutely love it. That's probably the best case scenario for this football team. But Mitch, obviously the draft is only like 20-something days away. Obviously it's coming up here fast. What do you think Washington should do at 29? Regardless, look, let's take the trade back scenario away. I think everyone and their mother wants to trade back at 29. Well known. What would you want? What do you want at 29?
I mean, to me, I think the most what makes the most sense is a trade backs. I want speed. I want speed on offense. They did a lot. They did a lot more in free agency on the offensive side of the ball than they did the defensive side. And quite frankly, I kind of have been looking at it like I think the draft is where they're going to try and upgrade on the defensive side. I'd be looking at corner. I'd be looking at corner is really, or edge rusher are the two kind of places that I think they need the biggest upgrades on the defensive side. But if they stay put at 29 and one of these speedster wide receivers kind of drops, that's the one thing I think this offense is missing, is really to take the top off the defense speed. Signing Michael Gallup, you hope that maybe he can be that guy. He's obviously older. I don't know that he still has that get up and go in him, but certainly it'll be interesting to see in training camp and preseason and whatnot. But I want to see them add speed on offense. And if one of those game breakers happens to drop back to the back end of the first round, I'd run to the podium to get him.
Yeah, you brought up Michael Gallup, and I was going to ask you what you thought what is your expectation for KJ Osborne and Michael Gallup?
The battle for the last couple spots in the receiver room. I mean, you look at kind of the guys that I would say quote unquote no are going to be there. Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Noah Brown, Luke McCaffrey, I think are the four that you can kind of write in pen are going to be on this roster. And as you start going to the back end, those last two or three wide receivers, you want guys who can give you something a little different than your quote unquote starters will give you. And there's no burner back there. There's nobody in that four that we've penciled in on the at wide receiver that really are gonna. I mean, Terry obviously does it, but I'm saying opposite of Terry. So I think that you're hoping that Michael Gallup is able to showcase some of the speed that we saw as we watched him run circles around, Redskins and Washington football team defenses for a couple of years. And KJ Osborne, I think they like the toughness that they get out of him. I think they like a little bit of the quickness and route running you get. But ultimately, I think, both of those guys, Michael Gallup, KJ Osborne, Kaz Allen, the other guys that they've brought in are guys that are coming in to compete. None of those guys have guaranteed spots, and certainly none of the moves that they've made at wide receiver this offseason precludes them from going early in the draft at receiver, and that includes the addition of Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now you brought up Debo, so I was going to ask you what's the biggest grand scheme takeaway from the offseason additions when in terms of team building?
I think with Deebo, what I've kind of come to the conclusion of, and maybe it'll turn out to be revisionist history, but I think his turn in San Fran when he went from being a really big part of that offense to being a little bit more of a bit player was when they brought in Christian McCaffrey. Debo is a good wide receiver and he's a good running back, but part of his value is his ability to play all over the field. And they kind of took that away from him, when they brought in McCaffrey, who's also another guy that can do all those different things. So I look at this, Commanders offense. I look at what Cliff Kingsbury has done over the years. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for Debo to get the ball in a lot of different creative ways. Do I expect that he's going to go out and have, 1,000-yard receiving season? No. But I think that he can get over 1,000 yards in total yards. And even if you look at his numbers, last year, which everyone thought was such a down year for him and he played poorly, we would have killed to have a. I think Debo is going to be an interesting Swiss Army knife for this offense to use, and I think about all of the screen passes and quick passes that they threw to De'Ami Brown all season long, and I'm much more excited about Debo, taking those and running them because De'Ami came through in the playoffs and obviously had a couple of great games, but he was inconsistent at best, and I think they've built a wide receiver room that's amongst the most physical in the NFL. And, they asked their receivers to do a lot, not just in catching balls, but in blind. If Terry's catching balls and Noah Brown and Deebo Samuel are lead blocking for him, I'm okay with that on the outside. Those two guys are going to be tough to get by.
Oh, I totally agree with you. And now with like Adam Peters and just the way that Dan Quinn, everybody is kind of involved in this whole thing. Do you think that the champion making it to the NFC Championship change things? Like, let's say Washington did make the playoffs. Let's say they lost against Tampa Bay. Do you think that they would have gone out and traded for Laramie or Debo? Do you think that that championship game, making it there, kind of changed the speed on which you kind of needed to raise the talent level of this team?
I don't really think so. I think that you look at what, the 49ers did with Adam Peters, which is really kind of all we have to go off of.
Right.
When very good players became available, he wasn't scared to go out and make a move and make some trades. We saw him work a little magic last year in the draft and trade back a couple times and, do that. So I think, I think back to the Cincinnati game was that week 3 on Monday Night Football. And, Jaden throws the touchdown to Terry to win the game. I think that is what changed kind of the outcome, the trajectory of this team in the season, because you saw how much a great quarterback can change things. And, you look at Cliff Kingsbury's offense and what this team did offensively last year, and they had to send so much help to the offensive line, tight ends, running backs, sometimes 2 tight ends and a running back to help protect Jaden. And that's not even the times that Jaden, was taking hits. To go out and get a guy like Laramie Tunsil is a game changer, because it's not just that Laramie Tunsil is a good player, it's that you can leave him out there on an island on the left side, and the rest of your offensive line, that's where you send the help to. And I think ultimately it's going to allow them to send more receivers out into running routes. I think you're going to see tight ends be a little bit more involved, because they're not going to have to stay and chip and double and block as much as they did. And, we'll see what happens at the running back position as we get closer. But, I think not having those guys have to stay in and block all the time helps with not just how beat up they get when they're doing that, but also, we saw how electric Austin Eckler was, particularly in that middle screen game and whatnot. So I just think, when you get an opportunity opportunity to sign a player with that much talent. And I imagine that Houston fans are probably feeling the way Washington fans felt when Trent Williams left. Like, it's a bit of a game changer. So I don't think that I think that that deal would have been made as long as the team was good last year. That they were ready to kind of take that next step, and he's a big part of that.
I got you. So not much so about the championship game, much more so about like just the trajectory of how they were, especially Jaden Daniels in this offense was performing. But right now, Washington is predicted to win 10 and a half games, Mitch. Wow. I mean, what a turnaround from 1 year, right?
I mean, they won 12 last year. I
Right.
know, the schedule being tougher, being that they finished second in the division, is only only really counts for 3 games or so. It's the fact they have to play the AFC West, they have to play Patrick Mahomes, they have to play Denver, they have to play they play a better division this year. The sky's the limit for this team. I mean, there's no number you could tell me, short of them, going 15-2 or something like that. That would really shock me because, I don't expect that necessarily Jaden's going to stay on that same, the same rocket ship that he's on. But I do expect it to continue to go to plane upwards. And ultimately, there's a lot of winnable football games out there, especially when your quarterback is able to go out and be the, most athletic, best player on the field.
Absolutely, man. And his work ethic is top of the line as well. But with kicker, do you think that Washington should draft a kicker? I had Phillips on Sunday, and that's something that
No,
he still
no.
wants.
I mean, they need to add it. They need a better kicker, but you don't waste a draft pick on it, particularly when you have as few as they've had. I mean, like you can find kickers out there. There's go to a European soccer field and find some kid who's on, third string La Liga or something like that. There are kickers out there. You can go find them. This team has been cursed with the kicking position for a long time. I don't know that it's such an absolute that when a kicker is good in college that they're going to be good in the pros. Do not waste precious ammunition on a kicker.
Oh, I totally agree with you there, sir. And look, I'm not going to say waste because I still think look, the field goals are important, but I totally pick up what you're putting down, man. Next question for you. Do you think that there's any positions in the draft that Washington could double dip in?
Double dip in terms of hit twice in the same draft.
Yeah. Like, let's say the trade back does happen, either in the first or second round, to
Yeah,
be able to recoup more. Is there any position you could see where they would be like, all right, maybe they would go with Tua there?
yeah. I mean, corner and D end are the two that I guess that they could go for, but I don't know that unless they end up with unless we're talking about a fifth and a seventh or something like that as the double dip portion. I don't know that that's actually going to happen. This team, this roster is not where it needs to be to considering the success that they had last year. You know, I hate to keep harping on this, but like you go back and Emmanuel Forbes, Jamin Davis, Fedarian Mathis, if these dudes hit over the past couple seasons, like it changes the way that you're looking at this roster and this draft because you have, three more, which you hope would be starters, but at least contributing football players. And the fact that they have there's such a dearth of talent from, basically 4 or 5 years worth of drafts puts this team in a situation where they do have to go out and sign the Dietrich Wises, Eddie Goldman's, Jonathan Jones like group of players because you need kind of high floor players so that you can, keep this thing moving in the right direction without having, long-term commitments to these guys because you still need to build through the draft and build out the entire 53, which is something that, previous coaches that were here weren't particularly concerned about.
I mean, I only have a couple more questions for you before we let you get out of here, sir. But now we are joined by my co-host, Michael Hall. Hall, do you have a question for Mitch?
Yeah, this actually kind of bleeds into what we were just talking about, but my question is just obviously they haven't done the draft yet, but just through the offseason so far, do you think that they've done enough on the defensive side of the ball, with that being the weaker side of the team last year?
I mean, have they done enough? No, but I think they've added some nice pieces that'll help them out. I think I'm excited about Will Harris. I mean, I think I look at safety a little bit like I look at running back, where if you're not getting that, top end talent, if you're not going and getting the guy who might be a future Hall of Famer or whatever it may be, then I think you can kind of pick and choose your guy from the heap and not pay him a ton of money, which is why I think some of the Brian Robinson discussion about getting rid of him or trading him is crazy because I think he's a decent player. I don't think he's going to ever give you Saquon numbers or anything like that, but I think he can do enough to keep the offense moving in the right direction. I look at Will Harris a lot in that same way. I think that he does a lot of different things that can help this team. The fact that he can step down and play kind of a slot corner position gives you a lot of flexibility with what you want to do with, Mikey Sainristil and Marshawn Lattimore. Quan Martin had a pretty good season last year. I think he went largely under the radar and didn't get a ton of credit for playing pretty well. And for those who are upset about Jeremy Chin leaving, they are probably the same people who are upset about Cam Curl leaving. And ultimately, you got equal to or better production, over the years. And I think we'll see the same thing with Will Harris this year, where a guy who can step in and help you out right away.
Oh, absolutely love it, Mitch. My next question for you. What's the best case scenario? I know you already talked about corner and edge, but would you say that's the best case scenario for Washington leaving rounds 1 and 2, possibly with that trade back, is getting an edge and corner, in your opinion?
Yeah, probably. I mean, listen, I think I know they spent a lot in free agency and trades helping out the offense, but helping the offense helps the defense. The complementary football, everyone's favorite, cliche saying, but I think they need to add speed all over the field, both offensively and defensively. I think a big player that's kind of going under the radar, it might be Jordan McGee, who was the 5th rounder last year from Temple. Coming out of camp last year, he looked really good. He had a knee injury and ultimately wasn't able to play the first half of the season, and then kind of was playing catch up the rest of the year. But you look at kind of the linebacker position and how that can affect as you go around the rest of the defense. And if Jordan's able to step in, particularly on passing downs, and be that more athletic linebacker who can, cover some tight ends and running backs out of the backfield, that frees up Frankie Louvu to play more of a traditional linebacker position as opposed to an edge rusher, which I think helps the overall value of the defense as a whole. So, I mean, I think that, there are a couple guys that are on this roster who didn't get a ton of burn last year, who, if they're able to kind of step up or continue growing in their role, could help out a lot. But ultimately in the draft, I think both offensively and defensively, speed.
My man, the last question I have for you, you already highlighted it because, of course, you had to think ahead of time and to be able to pick my brain on this. But Brian Robinson, do you think the organization is invested into replacing him as RB1?
I think Deebo Samuel is going to take a lot of carries away from Brian Robinson this year, is where I guess I would start.
Okay.
And I wouldn't be shocked if they went to the draft as well. But ultimately, I think that Brian Robinson is going to be on this roster. I don't think he's a game breaker, but I think, again, he's another player who's not quite as bad as fans made him out to be. You look at early in the season when there were big holes for him to run through, he looked pretty good. He was popping off 5 a clip as he was going. And as the season wore on and the holes started, closing up and teams started catching up to what Cliff was doing in the run game, he started to struggle more. And I don't know that he necessarily rebounded incredibly well from some of those struggles. Now he has another year in the offense. I don't know that it really pays to do much with him. Let him ride out the season next year. Let him show who he is or what he is. And, the good thing about this coaching staff and this front office, as we saw with all the draft picks that they cut and got rid of last year, if there's a guy that doesn't fit what they want to do, they're not scared to get rid of him, particularly if it's a guy that they didn't draft. And, I think when people are frustrated about Marshawn Lattimore and think he's a bum and this, that, and the other thing, point the same direction with Marshawn that I do with a guy like Brian Robinson, where these are guys that you hope can help you win and you want to give them an opportunity to prove that they can. But at the end of the day, if you get out of training camp and B-Rob is, a plotting, a plotting running back and not able to do much, I have no doubt this coaching staff, this front office will make a move and get out of that player. So maybe it's too much of I trust Adam Peters, but I like the ability that they have to cut the cord when it needs to be. And I think Brian Robinson will have a lot of competition in training camp, but ultimately it's going to come down to, what he shows on the field.
My man, absolutely love it. Music to my ears. Before you get out of here, Mitch, would you like to supply your social media handle and your show, just in case anybody watching hasn't yet?
Is it music to your ears that they might cut Brian Robinson?
No, it's music to my ears that you don't think that they're basically going to walk away from Brian
Oh,
Robinson.
all right.
Because
I know
I've
where you're
been,
on that one.
no, I've been saying that for a while that everyone wants to draft a running back at round 1, round 2, and I'm like, is that really going to get us over the hump against Philly? Is adding look obviously very talented running backs being added here, but me being former offensive lineman, I'm much more so about getting in the trenches, fixing that, and then letting your running back room kind of develop from there.
Yeah, the running back position to me is almost fairly devalued. Like Saquon's worth way more than the $12 million that he got paid last year, and obviously his new contract shows that. But if you're Saquon, if you're Derrick Henry, if you're one of these guys who is an elite running back, you deserve your cash. But that next level below that is a big drop off when you get to kind of those average running backs. Who's the running back the Giants drafted last year? Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah.
So like that dude showed a lot last year. I think he was a 5th rounder, and I love that they signed Russ because I think that's a disaster waiting to happen in New York. But Tyrone Tracy, exactly the kind of running back that I would love for Washington to get. 5th, 6th round, a guy who has a lot of athleticism, hasn't had a ton of opportunity to show it on the field, and is able to pop out there and do it.
My man, Mitch, I can't thank you enough for joining us. And it seems like Sierra finally won that battle, trying to get Russ back to New York. I know that was something she really wanted to do. Right. But Mitch, I hope you have a great Wednesday evening, brother. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, man.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me, guys.
All right, Mitch. Hey, hello, everybody. And we just talked to the man, Mr. Mitch Tischler. Always appreciate Mitch's time. Hall, what's going on? What's on your head, man? You got a camel hat? Where'd you get that from?
No, man, it's a hog. Like you see,
Dude,
So-
it looks like a camel.
it's
But I
hold on.
respect it.
Nope, wrong way. Redskins.
Oh, where'd you find
Redskins, hogs. Get it? Get it? Courtney's like, well, she just retired last year, but her former like teacher assistant that she had for like 6-7 years or whatever, had like a bunch of she has like a bunch of like throwback Redskin stuff, like vintage. Like she could probably sell it and get some like decent money stuff. But she's like, no, and I'm like, well, you can pass some of that stuff to me. She just gave me this little thing, but whatever. But she has like some like legit like signed like Doug Williams stuff, Art Monk stuff. Like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, she got like Redskins, like legit Redskins vintage stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely worth a penny or two. And
Yeah.
before we are joined by our next guest, just real quickly, I just wanted to kind of talk about, because you haven't been on past, you just missed last week, right? You were on the week before.
I was on Sunday. I just missed Wednesday.
Yeah, it's craziness popping off now. But how did you feel about Mitch in that running back room?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna ask him like, you think they should spend like a top, I don't know, let's just call it like 150 pick on a running back, or do you think that fixing the trenches and upgrading the line and keeping the running back room not status quo, because obviously outside of like Chris Rodriguez, everyone else has his own expiring contracts basically, so they're gonna add a running back to this room because they need a younger guy for the future. But
Yes, you are correct about that, because that is the one glaring thing in here, right? Like all 4 running backs are scheduled to not be on the roster next year, right?
Exactly.
And it's
So
not
they're
like
gonna
you're
have to
only
get
going to
a
go
guy.
through free agency next year.
Exactly. So that was going to be my question for him. Like, do you think that they spend a high value, like top 150 pick on a running back, or do you think that upgrading the line and making that better would get Brian Robinson and the rest of that running back room back to the first half of the season? And he pretty much answered that with the second part of the of my question. So, but yeah, I mean, again, I don't care what round or when they add a running back. I just want a running back that has speed and that can take it from R20 to their end zone. You know what I'm saying? Like, love Brian Robinson, but he's not that dude that can take it from one side of the field to the last. He did it against the Titans, but like literally, I could have probably done that. You could have drove a truck through that hole. So,
But you
But
got to
no.
do that, man. He had a great run. Just give
no,
him
he
credit,
did.
man.
And he had breakaway speed on it too. He ran like what 40 plus yards or whatever it was. Like, he outran a dude. He can outrun people, but it's just like, it's just one of them things where you see Brian Robinson and his speed, and then you see a guy like, I don't know, Jalen Warren. He's like a smaller, like, but like thicker guy, but you see him run, you're like, oh yeah, he has like another level of speed that Brian Robinson just doesn't have right now, and Austin Eckler doesn't have anymore, and I don't think Chris Rodriguez has. So, again, like I said, I don't want our only explosive runs to be able to come from Jaden Daniels. I want the running back to be able to create those explosive runs as well.
I totally agree with you. Now, let's answer a fan question that was submitted by Deluxe that was in the Discord. He says Texans, Chiefs, Packers, and Commanders were at the Rice Pro Day that included Gabe Taylor. What are your thoughts? Gabe Taylor being the younger brother of Sean Taylor here.
Yeah, no, that's nice. Definitely, that would be like a cool moment, full circle type moment if they drafted him in like a later round, day 3, or an undrafted free agent type guy. Excuse me, but yeah, it's cool. I mean, I'm sure they were there for like other dudes. I know Luke McCaffrey, I think, played at Rice. That's where they drafted him out of. So they probably had their eye on a couple players dating back to last year when they were scouting Luke McCaffrey. So I'm sure there's probably just doubling back, checking on the players that they've been scouting since last year, including maybe Taylor's younger brother. But yeah, that'd be cool. A nice full circle moment if he ended up on the Commanders.
Yeah, and great question submitted by Deluxe because the title of today's episode is Pro Day Poppin'. And obviously the pro days are really popping at this moment in time, which our next guest will be able to give us some insight on and talk about some standouts from it. But my thoughts on it is I'm glad that they're doing their due diligence. If they're sending people to go see what's going on at Rice's pro day, obviously they're going to be doing that for a lot of those situations, right? And especially given the fact of you only having 5 draft picks at the moment, you're going to need to be able to bring in some UDFAs here, right? And that's a kind of area where you're the widespread aspect. And if it would write itself if Washington were able to get their hands on Gabe Taylor. Everyone and their mother would absolutely love it. I know that the older crowd would be kind of pissed off because having Taylor on a Commander's uniform just seems to really get people fired up. But it's something that would be awesome to see, almost poetic in a sense. And obviously, I'm rooting for the young man. It's funny because when you see a picture of him, I mean, dude, you could see the facial structure, of Sean. The age gap, I mean, man, that old man's putting in work, dude. I'll tell you that.
Well, it's crazy because I remember when they did like a football life with Sean Taylor, like back however many X years ago it was. And I remember at the end of it, they were like showing Sean Taylor's dad, and like, they were talking about obviously how he trained Sean Taylor when he was a kid, And they were like, there's another Taylor growing up where Sean Sr. is taking him under his wing, and it was Gabe, and they were like showing him doing drills, and like it's just crazy now, like all these years later, that he's about to be like in the NFL more than likely. It's just like, damn, I remember watching the little kid on TV at the end of like Sean Taylor's thing, and it's just like, damn, getting old.
Absolutely, yeah, we are getting old. My leg reminds me of that every day when I'm at work and just walking around trying to chase my kids. Absolutely love it. But I will say this, man, a lot of respect for that young man. They continue to do what he's doing. And I'm just glad with the organization of what they've done this far because it really just shows you how awesome things are at this moment. But Hall, like, I want to get your opinion on this. What are some positions that Washington cannot leave the draft without addressing?
I'm not gonna go with the obvious one, which is edge. Obviously, cornerback is like the obvious one as well.
Well, they're all obvious, but
yeah, I know, but I'm saying those are like the top 2.
yeah,
Those
but
are like
you got to give me one position.
I'm trying to go. I'll just stick with the running back theme. Just
I knew it, dude.
I mean, what can I say? But no, only because, like I said, I think they do need a running back on this offense that can, like, a speedy guy that Cliff can kind of not use as a gadget guy, but can a change of pace type of guy. Austin Eckler is the change of pace guy, but he doesn't have that top end speed anymore that he had 3-4 years ago. And yeah, I just think that, like I said, outside of Jaden Daniels, obviously Deebo Samuel can take an end around or a quick screen or any type of short, quick pass to the house. But I want big run plays generated outside of Jaden Daniels for the most part. And I think that they're going to need to address running back and outside that we talked about. All the running backs are pretty much on expiring contracts. So you're going to need a running back of the future in this offense as well. So, yeah, I don't care when they do it, second, third, fourth, whatever round it may be, undrafted, as long as he's a speedy guy that can take it to the house from our side of the field to the next, I'm okay with it.
I'm right there with you. I won't say running back. When I say I'm right there with you, just because at this point it's just me voicing like whatever to transition, right? But look, I think that the non-obvious answer, I think it actually could be obvious to people, would be wide receiver. that you do need to stretch the field, right? I know that they have met formally with Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. I know that they also met with Jalen Noel from Iowa State. And those are two guys that the X of Jaden Higgins, 6'4", running like a 4.45, him being like that number one type of wide receiver for Iowa State, whereas Jalen Noel was really the separator, the explosive guy deep downfield. I saw a stat earlier that there's only a handful of guys above Jalen Noel in the amount of deep catches that he has gotten in his college career. And so it's just going to show you that you could really do really well with Jalen Noel and a very good route runner. And so I think wide receiver is one of those, because if you look at the wide receiver room, Terry and Debo were drafted in the same class. And so it begs the question, you need some youth there, right? And obviously they have Luke, and a lot of love Luke, but just saying the obvious being you're going to need some youth there. But without a doubt, it's edge rusher. And there is so many edge rushers in this class. Antoine Powell-Ryland today at his pro day had a 40-inch vertical. This is a guy I've been talking about, 16 sacks last year, an absolute monster. But now we are joined by our next guest, friend of this show, very talented for the Draft Network, Mr. Ryan Fowler. How are you doing on this Wednesday, sir?
Doing well. Appreciate you guys always having me on.
Absolutely, man. You know I always got to soak. I'm a sponge when you come on here, brother. And the question that I have for you, the pro day standouts so far.
Yeah, I think really today, even with Mason Taylor, down there at LSU, a guy that has had a lot of buzz even since Indy. Just who the young man is, away from the football field. Obviously all the attention is he's the son of Jason Taylor, all that good stuff. But he's a sensational young man, just a leader, and also a guy that's just dedicated to his craft and wants to get better and better and better. Guy runs out there today and goes 4.5. You look at Emeka Ibuka, as far as what he did today at his pro day. We didn't see Ashton Genty run. Would have liked to seen that. And I think on the opposite side of things too, Kyle, where we want to see some more from some guys. Xavier Restrepo yesterday at Miami. Now, I will say this. I wasn't expecting Xavier to be a 4.4 guy, 4.5 guy. 4.8s, 4.9s, expecting there to be an outlier. But I think the biggest thing with X, and I love him. I love his game. I think I draft him in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But I think you're not going to see him in that day 2 bucket anymore. You're probably going to see him in that 4th, 5th, maybe 6th round bucket. I'd snatch him up there if I'm a GM, because I think if you want to draft a professional and a guy that understands how to separate, a guy that was at Miami to where Michael Irvin, Santana Moss, Reggie Wayne, no one ever had more success than what Xavier Restrepo did at Miami. So he's just a fundamentally good football player. So I think with pro days, Kyle, there's a lot of good, but there's also some bad that may affect some guys here in these next few weeks.
Yeah, very similar to like how Cooper Kupp was used with the Rams with Xavier Restrepo. Just very highly productive at Miami. And obviously Cam Ward would probably stand on the table for him if the Giants wanted him, of course. Or not the Giants, but whoever the Titans, if they do get him. But I had a question submitted from our friend DT Sensei, who was on the draft show pod, the Red Zone and the Lab draft show that we did. And his question to you, which was a really good one, which late round linebacker would be intriguing for the Commanders to look at?
It's a great question. I think there's a couple guys that really popped to my mind. One is Smail Mondon from Georgia.
Okay.
Then there's another guy, Nick Martin from Oklahoma State.
You love Nick Martin, yeah.
I love him, man. I think he's just a flat-out ball player, now fully healthy. And also a similar type of player that may even go later than those guys is Chandler Martin from Memphis. He was a combine snub, standout at Shrine. Memphis produces athletes every single year. I know when you guys think of Memphis, we think of Antonio Gibson, but there's a lot of players that have come out there in the past. But when you look at Chandler and his ability both as an athlete and a football player that hasn't had a lot of attention, and explosive on day 3 that can maybe compete with guys like Jordan McGee or the Dom Hamptons of the world, or cut their teeth on special teams. Chandler Martin's a guy probably in that 5th to 7th round range I'd definitely like as a late day 3 guy.
Absolutely love it. What do you got, Hall?
Yeah, so there's been I know that the Commanders had a top 30 visit with Olu Femi.
Femi. Yeah.
Yep. Tell us a little bit about him, because there seems to be a little bit of growing smoke around maybe the Commanders targeting him and maybe at 29, or maybe trading back and get him in the 2nd round.
Yeah, guys, this is what I love about this process, and even coming on here with you guys and talking ball. This stuff excites me. Like, generally, it gets me pumped up, especially when the Commanders get guys in the building like Femi Oladejo. And also look out for viewers. I'm actually talking to Femi tomorrow on my podcast series. So I'm going to ask him about how his visit went with Washington, all the good stuff. He is one of the winners, the risers of the pre-draft process, if you will. Off-ball backer at UCLA, moved down to edge, just physically impressive. At the Senior Bowl, it's more so than just winning isolated reps for those guys and, one-on-ones and stuff, but just seeing how these guys communicate with teammates, communicate with coaches. Femi standing on the sideline, communicating to guys on the field, off the field, and to the coaches as far as what's coming offensively. So he can see it at all two levels as far as off the ball and now working towards closer to the line of scrimmage, which he will be at the NFL level. And a big thing with him, guys, is how they used Frankie Louvu right last year. Now, I think Frankie's a higher level athlete right now than what Femi is right now. But I think with what Femi could do for this defense as probably a top 40, 45 pick is a very hybrid type of player that just he understands it from the shoulders up. And that's the biggest thing. You look at Adam Peters as far as guys in the building, athletes, and will he fit the culture? Femi Oladejo is that guy.
And I want to go more into detail with these draft prospects, Ryan, because Darian Porter is somebody I really wanted to talk about. Former wide receiver turned cornerback, 6'4", kind of fits the bill of what Dan Quinn, Joe Witt kind of like in a defensive back. But the one thing when I'm watching his film is, why isn't he on the field more? Do you have any insight as to why that's the case? There's some corners with 700 to 800 snaps. He only had about 400 this year.
Yeah, I wish I did have some more insight on that too, Kyle. I had that question as well. I think one thing with Darian that's also really impressive is, he was second to Tez Johnson in the 3-cone time at the combine. For a guy that big, that has high hips, that's just physically impressive, first off the bus type of guy, if you will, the ability to change direction, and that length and the tape is really good. I think his best football is down the road because there were at times, even at the Senior Bowl, to where some of those smaller, shifty receivers like a Tez Johnson or even his teammate there and Jalen Noel at Iowa State, to where they could give him some trouble in those short areas. But if he's a guy that you want to draft and fill that role, if you will, of a Benjamin St-Juste to play inside the contact window and force guys to get off the line of scrimmage and then also flip your hips and be able to run, at the NFL level, you got to be able to play man and you got to be able to run. And I think with Darian Porter, he checks those boxes and really bolds those boxes for a team on day 2.
Yeah, there's not many guys out there who could say that they were able to strap up Jalen Noel at Iowa State. I know Sebastian Castro, the safety from Iowa, he wants everyone to burn that Iowa film with what Jalen was able to do to him. Sorry, Hall.
So one of my favorite things this time of year is to scroll through Twitter and see the different mock drafts, see a lot of fan mock drafts. And a guy that pops up a lot on day 3 is Kyle Williams. I know he was one of the guys at the Senior Bowl that was kind of a name that was buzzing a lot. Do you see him being a fit with the Commanders in this offense, and what does he do well?
And he dialed up Travis Hunter. I saw a rep of that the other day.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah, he did. That separation translates with Kyle Williams. I think he is. I don't want to say a lot of guys are underrated in this class, but you guys know me. I really like to dive into these guys, specifically on day 3. Everybody can talk about top 100 guys, but can you talk to me guys at 160, 170, 200 and beyond? And I think with Kyle Williams, to where I don't think he's going to get to that 200 range, but what is he going to be for an NFL offense? And this class, to where I'm not high on Ted McMillan, I'm not high on Luther Burden. I'm looking for guys that are going to be able to come in and play right away and potentially be a top 3 receiver in an offense. You draft Kyle Williams day 2, early portions of day 3. If you're able to add some more capital, I think right away he's going to compete and potentially beat out a guy like Luke McCaffrey in my mind.
Okay. I hear that. Now, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, that Washington doesn't go with edge at 29. They trade back and they get a guy like Jaden Higgins, who I love. I know you love. You were the one that brought him up to me. Then obviously Jalen Noel kind of just jumped off the film as well. But let's say they get corner in the second round to be able to shore up that secondary to make that a strength. What are some edge guys in the middle rounds? Because I think as much as running back gets the run of how plentiful it is, the edge crop is amazing in my personal opinion. So what are some guys to pay attention to in those middle rounds?
Yeah, 3 guys off the top of my head. David Walker, Central Arkansas. Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech is one of my guys in this class. I don't know if you saw my tweet earlier. The guy jumped 40 inches at the vert today at the pro day after jumping 36 and a half at that 6'3", 250 down there. He's just a flat out alpha, and excellent seeing him at Shrine. And then a guy, fellas, that is not talked about at all, that I have a second round grade on, Ashton Gelati from Louisville. Just blows through your face mask every single rep. He's not talked about at all. Now, is this because the class is so deep? That's fine. I get that. And that's okay, because those guys just slip under the radar as well. Another ACC guys came on Rucker from North Carolina. But Ashton, I think, is someone that I would prioritize if I was a GM, to where I know what you're getting from him on early downs as far as stopping the run, and then a guy that can play. He can play 3, he can play 4-eye, he can play 5, he can play wide 9 and reduce those angles on the outside. Just a guy that gets after people along the front 4. So those are really those 3 couple day 2, late day 2 type of guys for me.
Yeah, and Ashton, I'll never forget that Louisville game against Miami where he nearly sacks Cam Ward, but Cam Ward gets that ball away to Xavier Restrepo, literally right over the defender, and nearly a touchdown. One of the most remarkable plays I saw from Cam Ward, and really made me say, wow. And Ashton, you're right about Ashton, dude. He's a big, thick dude, and he does have the pass rush to be able to get down on you. But now, punt returners. Because right now, Washington walked away from OZ. They haven't re-signed Jamison Crowder. So I think punt returner is a big thing. Are there some guys in this class that maybe specialize in that, but also very productive in the passing game?
Yeah, I think there's 2 guys. One's a receiver, one's a corner. One is Tez Johnson from Oregon that's going to get some looks as a punt returner. Also, a guy on defense, that's Quincy Riley from Louisville. And I think that's also a guy that could potentially fit in that bucket of day 2 corners. Guys that can live on the perimeter or potentially bump in the slot, because I think he has the footwork and the eyes to do so, and the physicality in the fringe area. So really those 2 guys popped in my head as far as immediate potential pop as a special teams guy. Tez Johnson from Oregon, who I know there's some people that are down on Tez, but the stuff that translates in his game, the separation, the short area quickness, we also saw that at the combine, where the 40 wasn't great, but you're never going to be in a t-shirt and shorts running in a straight line of 40 yards. But the 3-cone, the short shuttle, all that stuff, he was top of everybody there at the combine, and that's where he wins most. So Tez Johnson and Quincy Riley for me as far as special teamers.
I think Washington met with Quincy Riley. I think they had a formal meeting with him, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe
Sorry,
so. Yes.
Yeah, me and Kyle were just talking about this earlier about running back situation, how Brian Robinson's contract is up after this year, Austin Eckler's contract is up, and then you got Chris Rodriguez, and they brought back what's his name?
McNichols.
McNichols, yeah. But my question is, are you on the side of them spending a high value pick, let's call it like a top 150 pick on a running back to kind of like that home run hitting type of speedy back to add to this offense? Or are you on the side of they got Laramie Tunsil, when you get Sam Cosmi back, you move Brandon Coleman around, the offensive line is kind of upgraded, and you just kind of plug and play the running back and see how it goes?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And I think looking at this offense, I was always high on Brian Robinson. I still like the player. It's just not being able to create your own creases for me, create your own space when things aren't great up front, and taking the load off of Jaden Daniels, where we know specifically in that Buffalo or the Buccaneers game or the Detroit game, the Philly game, the guy just constantly had to do everything with his arm and with his legs. And I think when you look at this class, to where there are different body types, right? You're going to have your day 2 guys of your Ollie Gordons and your Damian Martinez, Cam Scadaboos. And then you're also going to have your RJ Harveys. You're going to have your LaQuinn Allens, your Brashard Smiths, your Corey Kiners, those types of players, Taj Brooks as well. So I think if you're at 29, I think the only player, I mean, I like Travion Henderson. I do. At 29, maybe a little rich for me. The only player I would say considering at 29 would be Amarian Hampton from North Carolina. And I'm not just saying this to be different, but he is my RB1 in this class. I think he's just a sensational football player, and what he could be in this offense as far as a guy I could just turn and hand the ball off to 25 times a game and just say, hey, you're going to take the load of the offense today, and we're going to give Jaden a little bit of a break. That's what Amarian Hampton can do for the Commanders. So top 150, absolutely. I think there's a lot of teams around football that even if you don't need one, you're going to draft one, because there is just so much talent at the position in this class.
All right. I guess I could get on board with that, as much as I don't like the idea of it. But that being said, I want to talk to you about Mike Green. Obviously his pro day was amazing in itself, and obviously now everyone is. Look, we knew after the Senior Bowl that he was really going to be. Him leaving was a thing, right? We know that he was going to be highly sought after. But now at this point, I think it's concrete that most likely he's not going to make it to 29. Is that what you're hearing?
As of now, yes. I'm not going to talk about the off the field stuff,
Okay.
but there is some stuff that's kind of circling right now. But I would be surprised if he does make it to 29. Yeah.
Dang it. I was really hoping so. What about some corners that fit Dan Quinn and Joe Witt's defense?
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm not sure exactly if he fits to a T, but Azariah Thomas from Florida State, I think, is the premier man corner in this class. That
Okay.
also includes the Will Johnson, Travis Hunter. Travis is a more of a zone corner. I think that sometimes people forget he's not the best man corner in the world. So Azariah Thomas at 29 is a guy that I would have my sights set on, to where you want a guy to come in right away and challenge Lattimore, Sanders still. I love the Jonathan Jones edition, by the way. So those three guys, maybe you wait till day two to grab a player, but I think Azariah Thomas at 29 is a guy, as well as Maxwell Hairston. But again with Maxwell, trying to provide as much transparency as possible. There's some potential off the field stuff with Maxwell Hairston as well that I unfortunately can't get into on here.
Okay, I got you. Hall, do you have another one for Ryan?
Yeah, I got one more. I know a lot of people know that wide receiver as well is a big need for Washington. We talked about Kyle Williams, but who in your mind is the kind of perfect fit for this Cliff Kingsbury offense to match with Debo and Terry?
I'll say this, it's a local guy. I like Ty Felton.
Ty Felton, that's my guy.
I love Ty Felton. Yeah, I think he's a guy I've enjoyed watching at Maryland, to where he and Caden Prather were a little bit underrated this year. I know, Billy Edwards slinging that thing around. Shout out Lake Braddock out there, but Billy Edwards, wasn't the best quarterback in the country, but I like what Ty could offer, at all three levels. And he's tough as nails, and also getting to know him in this process is just someone that wants to go in an offense. He's not worried if he's a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 4 or 5, or also guys we talked about earlier that may have to return some kicks. And as you mentioned, Mike, as far as a guy that may be asked to take some touches on the outside or block your tail off for some outside zone, he wouldn't be shy in doing that either. But I think there's also a couple players that are bigger that are not getting a ton of attention. Daquan Felton, Virginia Tech, Isaiah Nair from Nebraska, and then Pat Bryant from Illinois. As far as a high level athlete, we know Adam Peters values those types of players on day three. Those three potential names, as far as just adding some verticality to this receivers room that's really lacking some.
Okay, and now to wrap this up, only a couple more for you. But small school standouts, not maybe standouts, but names that people should keep in mind.
Yeah, want to get some good names out here. Sacramento State interior offensive lineman Jackson Slater. He was at the Senior Bowl. If you just look up Jackson Slater online, look at his picture for Sacramento State. That's a dude that wants to run through your face mask, And as far as for the Commanders, to where you want some more depth within the interior, that's probably a guy that I'm looking for on day three. Probably a guy that may not get drafted, who I just love watching play football, is Sean Dolak. He's a linebacker from Buffalo. I believe he's a three-time All-American, I believe.
Wow.
Just a really good football player, and someone that just may challenge for the bottom of the practice squad, or maybe ends up on a 53. But as a small school type of guy, I really like him. And then I also want to talk about one player that may be drafted in the fourth round, that you're not probably going to see on a lot of boards, is Marshall safety J.J. Roberts, former triple option quarterback in high school. A lot of good attention from him and buzz around the league for him. So J.J. Roberts, safety from Marshall. All the attention, of course, is on Mike Green for the Thundering Herd. So keep an eye on him in that day three type of bucket as well.
Ooh, I love it. Now, with tight end, obviously, I'm not sure if Washington is going to be in the market for, obviously,
Yeah.
Tyler Warren should be a top 10 pick at the stamp it. Obviously, Colston Loveland, I really liked what I saw from him. Probably one of the most well-rounded if it wasn't for Tyler Warren. But some tight ends that maybe you're floating in that fifth, sixth, seventh kind of range that you think that Washington could, or even UDFA, because the tight end position even is probably one of the more underrated in terms of talent. And Logan, credit to him, brought this up to me last week.
Yeah, I think one guy in that seventh round UDFA bucket, DJ Thomas Jones, excuse me, from South Alabama. Really high level athlete, fluid, potentially that H-back type of role, or come in line and that as that Y. I want to see more from Ben Sinnott this year. If they didn't bring back John Bates, a guy my focus on day three was Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech. He is the premier blocker at the position in this class, a transfer from from Yale to Georgia Tech. So he's in that day three type of bucket. And I think two players that really remain interesting to me, guys. Well, really three, but I'll talk about these two first. Is Oronde Gadsden from Syracuse. I don't know exactly what he's going to be at the next level, but the receiver skills are there as a flex weapon. Bryson Nesbitt as well in the ACC from North Carolina is also in that same type. And then there's a small school kid. I wouldn't say small school, but just former transfer from Ohio State, Joe Royer. He's at Cincinnati right now. and just a really impressively built kid, not a lot of production, asked to block his tail off at Cincinnati, potentially to come in and just be a guy that maybe you put on the squad for 4 or 5 games in a year because he has athletic traits, and similar to Josh Wiley coming out of there a few years ago, Cincinnati going to Tennessee. So Joe Royer from Cincinnati, again, late day 3, UDFA, camp body. Just keep an eye on those types of guys. I remember last year I came on here, guys. I talked about Colson Yankoff from UCLA. He eventually ended up with the Commanders. So keep an eye on Joe Royer as well.
Oh, absolutely love it. Last one I have for you. I do want to talk about the edges, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. Let's say you had to rank 1 through 3, like Kyle Kennard, James Pierce, or like a JT Tuamolo.
I'd go.
And it's probably easy for you.
Yeah, I'd go James Pierce 1. I'd go close Kyle Kennard 2.
Okay.
That's a back and forth for me. And then I'd go JT at 3. The reason why, though, I have JT at 3, I don't know what his ceiling is as a football player.
Okay.
I know what I'm going to get with him as far as early downs in the edge, and I love the Oregon tape as far as just really elevating that pass rush profile. But when I look at Kyle Kennard and I look at James Pierce, to where James, the versatility, the explosion at 245 pounds to win in isolation, the Commanders need that. And then Kyle Kennard, I wouldn't be mad at that at all. At 29, I don't know if I'm there at 29. Second round, sure. But both those guys, I'm close with James and Kyle Kennard.
I should have put Nick Scorton on there as well, because obviously him being at 285, do you think he's going to be losing weight and be getting down?
Yeah, he is. He is. I'm really glad that you brought up his name, because there's some context needed with Nick and Shamar Stewart from A&M. You know, these guys, you want to see Nick Scourton as far as just his pass rush profile, turn on Purdue. Like, that's where he's pin his ears back, get after the quarterback. Both he and Shamar Stewart this year were asked to play a lot of the time 4-eye, stop the run. So a lot of people are seeing that and saying, where's the production? Where's the production? Well, that's what they were asked to do this year. So these guys are now going to play down. Nick's probably going to play 260, 255 potentially. Ask him to pin his ears back, and he's going to look like the guy that he was at Purdue, not this year at A&M. So there's some context on both Scourton and Shamar Stewart as far as guys that are going to be asked to do different things at the NFL level than what they were down there in College Station.
Yeah, somebody made a comment to me about Nick Scorton at Purdue, and I had to make sure to go in and look at it. And they even used him as to trail running backs in the passing game at times. Yeah. And look, there was separation there, of course, but that's typically what you see on a linebacker, not on an edge guy. And so it just speaks to the athletic ability of Nick Scorton, especially at lower weight. Ryan, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I know you have something to do here real quick, so if you'd like to plug your social media handle on your show, sir.
Of course. Yeah, I'm on X if you don't follow me there already, _ Ryan Fowler. All my work is at the Draft Network as always. And again, my prospect series, my interview series, all a bunch of guys commanding the huddle on all podcast platforms. And again, I will be talking to Femi Oladejo, who we talked about earlier, tomorrow at Friday at 4:30, and that will be coming out next week.
My man. Ryan, I can't thank you enough, sir. Enjoy your day.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
All right, everybody. We just spoke with the man, Mr. Ryan Fowler, the draft
Encyclopedia.
pro. Yeah, him, Ian Cummings, they really are, and Trevor Sikkema as well, just really up there in their knowledge of the NFL draft. But what was your biggest takeaway from what Ryan talked about?
Just that I like how I mentioned
You're talking about
Ole.
running backs, aren't you?
Well, no, I was gonna say I mentioned Ole, and he's talking about he's gonna interview him and how he's just like so smart and knowledgeable and just one of those dudes that's like cerebral above the head. And I know that Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, that's one of the things they really covet is a guy that even if he's not like the most athletic guy on the field, if he can play above the head, that's gonna close the gap on some of the guys that are a little bit more athletic than him. So, and like you said, 30 visit, a little bit of smoke around him, and the Commanders are liking him. So. Definitely going to check that out when he interviews him.
Yeah, and Antoine Powell-Ryland had 16 sacks last season. I said it like a month or so ago. I was like, remember that name from Virginia Tech? The dude is an absolute menace. I did a film breakdown on him. I think that's somebody you could easily slide in here and do well. Braden Swinson from LSU is another violent hand, very fast. When you watch him being able to trail some of these quick quarterbacks and get to the sideline, somebody who is all over the field, a high motor type of guy, would absolutely love them in the sort of middle rounds. I would be willing to argue with Ryan if he didn't have to go so quickly. That C.J. Diprin from Alabama would have Jackson Hollis give him a run for his money as the best blocker. But also Tyler Warren is no slouch, man. On our draft show, dude, that guy was trucking people. He took one linebacker and literally drove him to the back of the end zone and was still trying to fight him. And then Colston Loveland, very good with his hands, getting in inside of the chest. Really liked what Colston Loveland brings to the table, and it kind of that thinner build, which was surprising because Michigan, I love what their OC did by motioning Colston Loveland and having him be the lead blocker on like wide runs. Yep. And it was
exactly
brilliant.
Get him already moving in motion.
Exactly, and that's what I would be doing if I was an OC. I love the idea of that, just to be able to get that second level to create that wall for your runner. So I think like those guys are really, really good. But CJ Diprin had 32 reps on the bench at the combine, had the first overall score in production. So that's somebody that's really good. He brought up David Walker, who PFF graded as the #1 D end in the country last season. So there's a reason why that guy's being talked about. He probably would have, if Ryan didn't bring him up before, I'm sure Ryan would have said David Walker in that sense, because Central Arkansas, probably not the biggest of schools, of course, but that's somebody you got to keep your eye on as well. The edge class here is absolutely amazing in what they offer. And any last thoughts?
No. I liked what he talked about with what's his name? Scrouton from
Nick Scorton, yeah.
It's Nick Scorton, yes. Nick Scorton from A&M, just because that was the same thing you were saying as far as like, yeah, he didn't show to A&M, and that's because he was actually do something different. But if you put that Purdue tape on, it's like a whole nother player out on the field. So excited to see him dropping some weight and see what he does in the NFL or see where he gets drafted at.
Yeah, Nick Scorton had 5 sacks last season with Texas A&M, even though they weren't asked to really get after the passer. It was much more of isolating that run. It's Shamar Stewart, who only had a sack and a half this year, even though Shamar at times really pops off in the film at you, being a disruptive force back there. Like, I was blown away. I didn't even look at his sack total after watching his film. I really liked what I saw. But then when I saw that, I was like, it was a big confusing moment for me, because I was like, what? He was very disruptive. He was getting after stuff. How is it possible? He only had 1.5. But Nick Scorton, like, really when you see it with the Purdue stuff, that speed, that athleticism, what he was able to do against Michigan and J.J. McCarthy at times, even though that Purdue defense probably wasn't the best in the world at that time, really making a good name for himself there.
Yeah, although it's probably not the best, but it's still the Big Ten lineman, and the Big Ten is like known for like those bulky, huge, like just mammoth of like people like linemen. So he can definitely shows the bend and athleticism. So he definitely can put it all together and get it done.
And Baishal Tootin from Virginia Tech, another name to keep in monitor.
I love that dude, but he got to hold on to that ball a little bit better.
Of course. And I'd be willing to argue with running back. As much as we want to see explosion, I need to see you pass block, man. Need to see you pass block. That was the difference in the Cincinnati game, that touchdown to Terry McLaurin. Was Jeremy McNichols going in there and isolating and being able to take out that block, right?
You don't got to pass block if you take it to the house on first down. That's all I'm saying.
That's a good point, but easy to say that. But when you get into the game against other good offenses.
I know. Every first down is not going to be just.
Right. All right, everybody. That's going to wrap us up for this episode. You're a champion if you made it this far. You're awesome. I appreciate you.
Stared at my hat this whole time.
Yeah, dude. I'm sorry. I thought it was a camel. I couldn't tell at first because I can't see the top of your head on the recording. Yeah. Well, even the ears don't do it justice. It kind of looks like Reed. All right, everybody. That's going to wrap us up.
I guess it does look like a camel, man.
Yeah.
I can see why it costs like $5.
Yes. And we appreciate you guys. If you have any questions, you always find us, submit them in. Catch us again on Sunday, most likely. Make sure with Hall that it's okay with him being able to make that. I think Reed is going to be able to make that show. So make sure you don't.
Sunday I'm about to go to the Defenders game. I forgot about that.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Or they might ask you to coach.
I know, right? And then taking all the coaches away.
It's
they're about to get mud stomped, dog. They're not even going to have like any coaching staff out there.
Dude, they'll find somebody.
I know.
All right, everybody. We'll see you on Sunday, except for Hall, of course. I'm Kyle.
I'm Hall.
And we'll see you then. Washington football. Woo!
Hello.
What's up, everyone? This is Kyle from the Burgundy Zone. We are releasing our own merch to support the show. If you want to rock the Burgundy Zone logo or you want to see Reed's face on your shirt, we got it. We're starting with t-shirts, hoodies, and zip-up. So if you're a fan of the show, make sure you snag one before they are gone. Check out the link in our bio on Instagram, or you can find the link in the description of the video. Thanks again for all your support. Until next time.